Chess is a very frustrating game. You might turn a good game into a bad one by just blundering, and the game can easily slip right from your hands. But although you can checkmate your opponent, can you actually play a clean game with finesse and focus? Now, whether you're starting chess as a beginner player or have been a casual player for a while, this is the video for you. I got 5 rules to share that will turn you into an absolute beast at the game, and you'll dominate very easily. Now, let's get started. Rule number 1, play longer games consistently. And by longer, I mean that if you go to chess.com, you get to see all these different time controls and lead chess as well. And we're going to be avoiding blitz and bullet because playing blitz or bullet is like hanging out with that one group of friend that really doesn't do anything for you. And it's time to move on. You could be playing drunk blitz and still win because your opponent doesn't know what's happening. And honestly, bullet's even worse because if you're playing bad chess on a fast time control, that's literally brain rot. Now, GM Daniel Dubov said this about blitz as a time control. Blitz, you don't have to care at all. You can be drunk. You just need to be lucky, which is exactly the sentiments that I agree with when you're playing blitz chess. What do these top players have that enables them to play bullet or blitz chess so effectively? The three key ingredients are knowledge, experience, and talent. All of them have been grandmasters from a very young age and for a long time as well, which means they got serious talents, but also they just have more knowledge and experiences. And if you ever watched a Magnus Carlsen stream before, he sometimes dances or even plays drunk and wins his game still. And just remember that all of his speed is a result of all the enormous preparation paying off. He played in many world championships, so he's got great understanding of chess positions and great intuition as well. But let's compare to another player like Frank Marshall. He's also a pretty good player from the past. He spent 80 years preparing for the Marshall attack when chess engines still didn't exist. And you don't have to make an opening like him, but he's one of the reasons why he's a great chess player is that he spent lots of time studying chess, which improved his intuition. So just like him, you can improve at chess by developing your understanding and intuition over time by studying chess as well. Now, we can quickly test your intuition so far. Here's a position. What would you play in this position? You can pause the video here to find out. You might have noticed that the bishop is attacking the rook. But have you found the best move? Is actually the move bishop d6. And this might seem like a weird move because you're hanging your bishop. But the idea is that if the queen takes, then there is a discovered check. And you don't play chess all in one day and expect to see lots of results. That's the wrong way to go about it because you're going to just blunder many games at that one time and you're not effectively studying. What's more effective is to just split up your time amongst many days and play smaller amounts, but go consistently. Because when you go consistent and actually start to review your games and play some good chess, then that's when you can build good habits. So playing 1 hour for 5 days is much more effective than 5 hours in one day, let's say. And this is a way that you can study smart and not study hard. And please, for the love of God, just stop relying on your intuition 100% because you need to calculate. Because when you don't calculate, you're going to see this message from David, the chess review bot. And he's going to say that you're going to transition to checkers because chess is simply too hard. But if you just know a couple of things, like have a bit more knowledge and experience to build your intuition, then you don't have to get that message anymore. But if your knowledge is shit and your experience is shit, do you know what you get? Just a bigger pile of shit. That means that your gameplay will be shit as well. So it might absolutely suck to blunder away a game that you could have won or even have 10 blunders there. But you can use a technique and it's called reframing. This means that you want to take a blunder and view the positive aspects of it. Like, for example, the cup is half full or half empty. So that blunder the opposite of that is just it's just a learning opportunity. And the real mistake that you can make is just not learning from your mistake. So next time, just ask yourself, did I fall for an opening trap by blundering a pawn fork? Did you miss a strategic idea and just play a wrong move that blunders your rook or blunders one of your pieces? And do you just have bad technique? You're just up a bunch of material and you're just getting checkmated on the back rank. That's kind of embarrassing. If you're struggling in the opening, you know that you can just go to Lichess and literally just search for the opening and find your favorite opening. And if you're struggling with a certain move, you can literally filter it by the move type, and you can just look at all the theory there. And if you're struggling with the middle game, there's a bunch of middle game puzzles that you can do. If you're struggling with the end game, there's a lot of end game puzzles that you can do. But also remember that there's no point in playing longer games unless if you review them. So make sure you click that review button. And here you have to find out, are you blundering because or just making mistakes because your tactics are weak? Or if you're, falling to a lot of knight forks, then just doing more knight fork puzzles. That's basically the way to gain more experience with knight forks. You might not know how the knight moves very intuitively. And here are just some other things that you can look out for while you're reviewing. This is not the whole list, but it's just a list there. And with that, you want to track your progress every month or every 90 days as you like. And you should be looking at a good improvement if you're doing it correctly. But if your elo goes down, actually, then don't worry about that as well. You might need one of my other opening videos that I've made in the past to just to improve your elo. Now, here's the cycle. You want to learn your moves, play the moves, review your game, identify what you've blundered in the game, and then track your progress. And this is the summary behind the first rule. Rule number 2, focus and pause in critical positions. And you might be asking, what's a critical position? A critical position in chess is a move or set of moves that's going to change the direction of the game drastically. It can happen when you're going to decide where you're going to sacrifice. It can happen with a trading of a pawn or when you just push a pawn. And this could change your entire pawn structure. And it could even be as simple as where you want to place your piece to deal with your opponent's attack. And this is really important because if you don't find this move, then it's going to be really difficult to play onwards. So you might have a typical position where your king is exposed. And if you miss the moment right here, then you might miss the chance to win the advantage. And if there's a lot of complications on the board and lots of forcing moves, then it's really important to identify this is the critical position to spend some time to think about. Now, especially if your king or your opponent's king is very vulnerable to tactics, you might be losing or winning in a couple of moves. But before you get into all of this, just make sure your mental state is good, because if you're tilted at that point in the game, you might rush into playing a move that you'll regret later, like hanging a piece. You might crush your mouse, or you might throw away your laptop. And so you want to use this particular framework for those critical positions. So what's your opponent's ideas? Are they worth stopping? And can it be even stopped? Or is it just not worth stopping? And once you master this framework, you'll understand a chess term called prophylaxis. And prophylaxis is the art of understanding what your opponent wants to do and then preventing it. And another way of putting this is just how to stop your opponent from having fun. Now, here's an example. That knight on a3 wants to go to b5, and that's why white played that move. And so what do they want to do after they go to b5? They probably want to go to d6 sometime in the future. And so you can just entirely stop that idea just by playing a6. That is a prophylaxis move. Now, congratulations, you've now elevated yourself from learning just how to basically attack and defend with just a sophisticated threat executing, and now you're a prophylaxis enjoyer. And now here's another benefit of learning these concepts. You're going to unlock something. Now, if you're the type of person to sacrifice and send all your pieces to checkmate your opponent's king, this is going to be a big lesson for you. Make your opponent calculate while you're chilling with your opening setup that already provides you with the proper tools to sacrifice. So, for example, in this position, this is a typical position that you might get in the Taimano Sicilian. You have that bishop on b7 and that queen on c7. And I've had so many tactics and sacrifices involving that bishop as a key player in that tactic. And it helped me game hundreds of elos. And in this particular position, you can just use it to win a pawn safely after you kick out the knight on c3. And sometimes you'll find tactics that might even get you a queen to sacrifice. And after you sacrifice your queen, you can checkmate your opponent. Now, here's another framework that you can use, which is called checks, captures, and threats. So for checks, just make sure this is how you simplify your calculations. So you can check your opponent, you can think about capturing a piece, or just threaten something, whether that's a knight fork or a bishop pin or a skewer. Now, if you haven't finished checkmating your opponent by this point, then think about these three things: the pawn structure, the material count, and the king safety, and just evaluate the position at that point for the win. Here's another tip. Make sure to use highlights and arrows correctly. And if you do, then you'll be able to calculate better. But also, you're just forcing yourself to use your brain more. Because if you don't, 3 moves in, your position, you might have some basic idea of what's happening, but 5 moves in or 7 moves in, you're going to have absolutely no idea what's happening. And so using arrows can help you visualize. You want to also open your third eye and gain a new perspective of the board. And what I mean by this is you want to flip the board on chess.com. And when you flip the board, you might even get into your opponent's shoes and predict what they're going to play. And rule number 3, master 2 opening for white and 2 for black. And there's a reason why I mentioned 2 for both white and black, but I'll get to that later. First, I really want to address why we put so much effort into the opening. Imagine playing like Magnus Carlsen for the first 10 moves in chess. How overpowered is that? You get a big advantage right from the start. Well, you can with opening. And the real truth is that beginner players don't really know theory past 5 to 7 moves in their opening. So you can also think about it like this. At this moment, you're probably not able to differentiate between the pros and cons of different openings. And that's kind of like looking at different tools and seeing exactly the same tool. That's just very silly. It's like seeing a screw and using a hammer instead of a screwdriver. Is that how you want to play chess? And even if your opponent, plays out a theory, you can still remember your main moves in the opening you choose to learn as hints to play. You don't have to play the same exact setup against everything. So with opening knowledge, you'll just be able to know about different moves moves and strategies that you can play against your opponent, which will make you a much more versatile player. And the biggest takeaway in this video is that you actually need to play the same opening many times. In fact, even 10,000 times. You don't have to practice a whole bunch of different gambits or traps to win some games here and there. But you can actually try to just understand one opening, and that gives you, I promise you, that gets you much further than just practicing a whole bunch of shallow gambits and traps. And with this knowledge, you'll be naturally able to develop your pieces against your opponent's setup. You'll have your traps and threats that your opponents probably don't know and you have experience of, and you have all the prerequisite knowledge to launch a big attack. And if you're curious what Magnus Carlsen and Bobby Fischer played, here's what they played. They played a lot of Sicilian here. They played a lot of Ruy Lopez. And if you're wanting to practice these openings, you can literally look up their games and, take some of their ideas. So you need a weapon against the 2 most common moves in chess, which is e4 and d4. And for e4, I would recommend the Ruy Lopez. Magnus Carlsen and Bobby Fischer played it, so I would do that. And they also played a lot of Queen's Gambit Decline. So if you're interested in having a weapon for d4 as well. I would recommend that. And as black, against e4, you should have the Sicilian defense. And against d4, I would recommend Slav defense. These are both pretty intuitive openings that are easy to understand. I would recommend the Taimana Sicilian. I have a video on that if you're interested. Rule number 4. Find a solid move rather than the best move in trouble. So we saw this position earlier in the video, but the idea was that the bishop on c5 is attacking the rook on f8. And would you capture it? And capturing that rook is actually a good move, a solid move, because you're just up the exchange. Very simple. And we know the best move here is bishop d6, but sometimes positions can be very complicated to figure out and solve. And your opponents might have a lot of resources that you have to calculate out, which can be very time consuming. So this means that if you're just trying to win a game, you don't have to find the best move. You can just slowly gain your advantage by playing solid moves to continue. And let's talk about losing positions. How to play solid moves in losing positions. So here I have a question. Imagine you're in a losing position and have 4 choices. A, do you resign? B, do you continue but stay tilted? C, continue with focus. You're going to try to calculate the variations where you can trick your opponents and gain the advantage back or equalize for a draw. Or D, do the procedure and just get your rating back. Which one is good? Well, obviously you should continue with focus, but I'm going to give you the tangible reason why this will actually help you improve your elo. So, but here's a no-brainer case. If your opponent's 800 rated, and if they play the best move, bishop to e4, you should report your opponent. This is just, no 800 is going to play this. But how you actually gain elo really quickly is that you don't actually have to win more, even though it is nice to win more. You just have to mitigate losses by drawing more often. And how do you do that? You get into positions that are very tricky. Like if you have nothing against your opponent who has a bishop and a knight, like how many thousand elo players can solve that? Like it's very difficult to solve. You have to memorize like a sequence of moves and strategies. It's just very difficult. That's basically a draw at 1,000 elo. And if you're just down the exchange, like if you're down a knight, I would also this is probably a draw as well, because it's hard to attack your opponents when you have a lot of resources like this with the knights. Knights are very tricky, and you can often trick your opponents into a draw. And chess is really not about who makes more blunders. It's about who makes the last blunder. And the person who makes the last blunder often loses the game. So let's say this is your win percentage. You have a 40% win percentage, 30% draw, and you lose 30% of your games. And just by learning how to draw more, you're going to gain so much elo. So for example, against 100 games, against the same rated opponent, you're going to have 20 more draws or 20 less losses. And with the same win percentage, that means on chess.com, you might be saving about 8 rating points per draw because you're not losing 8. And so that means you're going to gain about 160, or you're not losing 160. So effectively, you're gaining it. And if you're curious about what the world champion, his win percentage is, so he's got about 5,600 games, and his win percentage is like 53% for the total games, 33% draw, and 14% loss. So I think this is a good benchmark to aim at if you're trying to track your progress and try to draw more games. And for Bobby Fischer, he wins about 57% of his wins, but just note that he has about 1,200 games, which is much less games. So if you play more games against higher rated opponents, you're probably going to go more towards 50%. So this is completely understandable. But this is also just a nice benchmark to see like how often you should be winning as well. Rule number 5 is just a practice. Don't be afraid to experiment. But the big caveat to this is that don't play Scholar's Mate and try to checkmate your opponent's like 5 to 6 moves. That's not a very productive way to learn chess. You're missing out on a whole gameplay there. There's also similar tricks like this where You can undefend the pawn, and when the knight takes, you can take back with your queen to win a piece. But don't try to go for those too much. If you want to improve, try to practice within a chess club with your friends, or even better, find a rival, because you know that one of the famous things in chess is the rivalry between Magnus and Hikaru, and so you want to basically do the same for yourself. You might hate them for their success, but you also kind of love it for their downfall when you checkmate them. Now, your chess will speak for itself at the end of the day. So whether you improve or not, this is good luck to you. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.